I was standing in my driveway on a Tuesday morning when Patricia Carson pulled up in her white SUV, her lips already pursed in that way that told me my peaceful week was about to end. She stepped out wearing her usual pantsuit and carrying a clipboard like it was some kind of royal scepter, her heels clicking against the asphalt as she marched toward me with the determination of someone who had appointed herself judge, jury, and executioner of our neighborhood in Boulder, Colorado. "Mr. Emerson," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to discuss your flagpole." I glanced over at the 30-foot pole in my front yard, the American flag snapping in the mountain breeze. I had installed it 6 months ago, and it had become something of a landmark in our subdivision. More importantly, it served a purpose that Patricia and the rest of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association had no idea about. "What about it?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. I had learned over the past 2 years of living here that engaging with Patricia too enthusiastically only encouraged her. She consulted her clipboard, her perfectly manicured nail tapping against the paper. "According to the HOA bylaws, Section 7, Paragraph 3, all flagpoles must not exceed 15 feet in height. Yours is clearly in violation, Patricia." I reviewed the bylaws before I installed it. "There's an exemption for structures that serve a functional purpose beyond decoration." Her eyes narrowed. "A flagpole is decorative. It needs to be shortened to regulation height, or you'll face fines. $500 per week until compliance is achieved." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. "The flagpole isn't just decorative. It houses critical weather monitoring equipment." "Weather monitoring?" She said it like I had just told her I was running a circus from my garage. "Yes, I'm a meteorologist, Patricia. I work for the National Weather Service, and this flagpole supports the only official weather station within a 50-mile radius. The elevation is necessary for accurate wind speed measurements and atmospheric data collection." Her expression didn't change. If anything, it hardened. "That's nice, Mr. Emerson, but the rules apply to everyone. I don't care if you're measuring wind or reading tea leaves. The flagpole comes down to 15 feet, or the fines start next Monday." She turned on her heel and walked back to her SUV before I could respond, leaving me standing there with a mixture of frustration and disbelief churning in my gut. I went inside and called my supervisor, Gerald, at the National Weather Service office in Denver. He answered on the third ring, his familiar gravelly voice a welcome sound. "Nate, what's up?" "We've got a problem. The HOA here is demanding I shorten the weather station flagpole." There was a long pause. "They want you to what?" I explained the situation, and I could practically hear Gerald's blood pressure rising through the phone. "That station provides critical data for the entire Front Range," he said. "We use it for severe weather warnings, climate research, and aviation safety." "Do they have any idea what they're messing with?" I tried to explain. She didn't care. "Okay, don't do anything yet. Let me make some calls. This is federal equipment we're talking about. They can't just demand you dismantle it because it offends their aesthetic sensibilities." I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on my work, analyzing weather patterns and updating forecasts, but my mind kept drifting back to Patricia's smug expression. That evening I walked out to examine the flagpole more closely. It was a beautiful piece of engineering, really. The pole itself was aluminum, designed to withstand 100-mile-per-hour winds. At the top, just below the flag, was the anemometer that measured wind speed and direction. Halfway down were temperature and humidity sensors, and at the base was the data logger that transmitted real-time information to the National Weather Service network. This wasn't just some vanity project. The data from this station had already proven invaluable. Just last month, it had detected a sudden wind shift that helped us issue an early warning for a severe thunderstorm that would have caught hikers in the nearby Rockies off guard. The station had literally saved lives, and now Patricia Carson wanted it gone because it violated some arbitrary height restriction. The next morning I found a formal notice taped to my front door. The HOA Board of Directors, which consisted of Patricia and 4 other neighbors who seemed to exist solely to rubber stamp her decisions, had voted unanimously to enforce the flagpole height restriction. I had until the following Monday to comply or face the fines. I called Gerald again. "They're not backing down, neither are we. I've been in touch with our legal department. They're drafting a letter explaining that this is federal property serving a critical public safety function. We're also reaching out to the Federal Aviation Administration because that station provides data for the Boulder Municipal Airport." "You think that'll work?" "It should. But you know how these AHOA types can be. They think their little fiefdom trumps everything, including federal law." He wasn't wrong. I had heard horror stories about HOAs fining people for having the wrong color mailbox or planting unauthorized flowers. But this felt different. This felt personal, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Patricia had some deeper motivation than just enforcing the rules. That weekend, My neighbor Tom stopped by while I was working in the garage. He was a good guy, a retired engineer who had lived in Meadowbrook Estates since it was built 15 years ago. Heard about your flagpole situation, he said, accepting the beer I offered him. News travels fast. Patricia's been talking about it non-stop. She's got it in her head that you're trying to make some kind of statement showing off or something. I shook my head. It's a weather station, Tom. It's not about making statements. I know that, and most of the neighborhood knows that. But Patricia doesn't care. She's been looking for something to sink her teeth into ever since the Johnson family moved out. She tried to find them for having a trampoline in their backyard, but they fought it and won. I think she sees you as her redemption arc, so I'm collateral damage in her quest to feel important. Tom took a sip of his beer. Pretty much. But I'll tell you this, Nate, a lot of people around here appreciate what you do. We see the weather alerts on our phones, and we know a lot of that data comes from your station. If it comes down to it, you'll have support. It was a small comfort, but it helped. Monday morning arrived too quickly. I was in my home office when I heard a knock on the door. It was Patricia, naturally, with another clipboard and a man I didn't recognize. Mr. Emerson, this is Derek Mills, our HOA attorney. We're here to conduct a formal inspection of the violation. I stepped aside and let them into my yard. Derek was younger than I expected, probably in his early 30s, wearing a suit that looked too expensive for HOA work. He walked around the flagpole, taking photos with his phone and making notes. Have you received the letter from the National Weather Service? I asked. Patricia's jaw tightened. We received it. We're not impressed. The bylaws are clear, and federal law doesn't supersede private property regulations. Derek cleared his throat. Actually, Mrs. Carson, that's not entirely accurate. Federal preemption can apply in certain circumstances. She shot him a look that could have melted steel. We're paying you to support our position, not undermine it. I'm paid to provide legal advice, and my advice is that this could get complicated. The National Weather Service has a strong argument about public safety and federal interest. Then we'll fight it, Patricia snapped. I'm not letting him turn this neighborhood into some kind of science experiment just because he thinks he's special. I felt my temper rising. This isn't about me being special. This is about providing accurate weather data that people depend on. Do you have any idea how many severe weather warnings have been issued based on information from this station? I don't care if it's predicting the second coming, she shot back. The rules are the rules, and you're going to follow them like everyone else. Derek looked increasingly uncomfortable. Mrs. Carson, perhaps we should discuss this with the full board before we proceed with fines. The board has already voted. The fines start today. $500 per week, as outlined in the notice. They left, and I immediately called Gerald. They're not budging. The fines start today. Don't pay them. Our legal team is preparing to file an injunction. We're also bringing in the FAA and NOAA. This station is too important to let some power-hungry HOA president shut it down. The next week was a blur of legal maneuvering. The National Weather Service filed for an injunction in federal court, arguing that the weather station served a critical public safety function and that the HOA's restrictions interfered with federal operations. The HOA countered with their own filing, claiming property rights and the sanctity of covenant agreements. Meanwhile, Patricia made my life as difficult as possible. She started showing up at random times to take photos of the flagpole, measuring it dramatically with a long tape measure while muttering about violations. She sent daily emails to the entire neighborhood, painting me as some kind of scofflaw who thought he was above the rules. But something unexpected happened. People started pushing back. Tom organized a petition supporting the weather station, and within 3 days, he had signatures from over 60% of the neighborhood. People I had never spoken to stopped by to express their support. A teacher from the local elementary school told me they used data from my station for science lessons. A pilot from the Boulder airport thanked me for providing reliable wind information. The tide was turning, but Patricia refused to see it. She called an emergency HOA meeting, mandatory attendance for all homeowners. I showed up prepared for battle. The meeting was held in the community center, a bland building at the entrance to our subdivision. Every seat was filled and people lined the walls. Patricia sat at the front table with the other board members, Richard, an accountant who always looked nervous, Susan, a yoga instructor who seemed perpetually confused, Margaret, a retired librarian who I suspected only joined the board for something to do, and Frank, a contractor who rarely spoke. Patricia called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. We're here to discuss the ongoing flagpole violation at the Emerson residence. As you all know, Mr. Emerson has refused to comply with our bylaws despite multiple notices and accumulating fines. I raised my hand. I'd like to address the board. She looked like she wanted to refuse, but the crowd murmured expectantly, "Fine, you have 3 minutes." I stood up, pulling out my laptop. I've prepared a presentation that I think will clarify the situation. I had spent the previous evening putting together a slideshow explaining exactly what the weather station did and why it mattered. I showed radar images from recent storms, highlighted how the wind data had improved forecast accuracy, and presented testimonials from the National Weather Service and the FAA. This station has detected severe weather conditions 43 times in the past 6 months, I explained. That data led to warnings that reached over 200,000 people in the Front Range area. It's contributed to research on climate patterns in the Rocky Mountains and provided critical information for aviation safety. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a graph of forecast accuracy improvements since the station went online. The National Weather Service has documented a 23% improvement in local forecast accuracy because of this station. That means people know more accurately when to seek shelter, when to postpone outdoor activities, and when to prepare for severe weather. Patricia was tapping her pen impatiently. That's all very impressive, Mr. Emerson, but it doesn't change the fact that your flagpole violates our height restrictions. Actually, it does, came a voice from the back. Everyone turned to see a man in a suit walking down the center aisle. He was carrying a briefcase and wore an FBI badge clipped to his belt. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't part of the plan. Special Agent Michael Torres, FBI, he announced, showing his credentials. I'm here because this matter has come to the attention of federal authorities. Patricia's face went pale. The FBI? This is an HOA matter, not a federal case. It became a federal case when you attempted to interfere with federal weather monitoring operations, Agent Torres said. The National Weather Service is a federal agency, and obstruction of their operations falls under our jurisdiction. He pulled out a document from his briefcase. I have here a cease and desist order. The HOA is to immediately halt all enforcement actions related to the weather station. Furthermore, any fines already assessed are to be rescinded. You can't just waltz in here and override our authority, Patricia protested, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Actually, I can. Federal law supersedes local regulations when it comes to matters of public safety and federal operations. If you continue to interfere with the weather station, you'll face federal charges for obstruction. The room erupted in murmurs. Richard, the accountant, leaned over to whisper urgently to Patricia. She brushed him off, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. This is ridiculous. We're a homeowners association exercising our legal rights. Agent Torres fixed her with a steady gaze. Mrs. Carson, I suggest you consult with your attorney. I think you'll find that your legal standing here is much weaker than you believe. He handed the cease and desist order to Patricia, who took it like it was contaminated. Then he turned to me. Mr. Emerson, the National Weather Service asked me to convey their appreciation for your cooperation in this matter. The station will remain operational. After he left, the meeting descended into chaos. People were shouting questions, some at Patricia, some at me. Tom stood up and called for a vote of no confidence in the board. Susan, the yoga instructor, immediately seconded it. Patricia tried to regain control, banging her gavel frantically. That's not on the agenda. We can't vote on something that's not on the agenda. Actually, Margaret, the retired librarian said quietly, according to our bylaws, any homeowner can call for a special vote if they have support from 20% of attendees. I think we clearly have that. It was the first time I had heard Margaret contradict Patricia. The cracks were showing. The vote was swift and brutal. The board was dissolved, with only Frank voting to keep them in place, and even he looked relieved when it was over. A temporary steering committee was appointed to oversee HOA matters until a new election could be held. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I was checking the weather station readings when I noticed something odd. The data transmission had stopped. I went outside to investigate and found that someone had tampered with the equipment. The cable connecting the sensors to the data logger had been cut, and there were scratches on the mounting brackets like someone had tried to remove them with a tool. I called the police and filed a report. The officer who responded, a young woman named Officer Ramirez, took photos and notes. Any idea who might have done this? I have suspicions, but no proof. She nodded knowingly. The HOA situation, yeah, we've been following that. This could be considered vandalism of federal property, which is a serious offense. We'll investigate. I spent the rest of the day repairing the damage. Fortunately, I had spare cables and the sensors themselves were intact. By evening, the station was back online, transmitting data as if nothing had happened. But the next morning, I woke up to find my yard littered with flyers. They were printed on bright yellow paper and featured a grainy photo of my flagpole with text that read, Nate Emerson thinks he's above the rules. Should we all just install whatever we want and ignore our neighbors? It was unsigned, but I knew Patricia's handiwork when I saw it. She was escalating. I collected the flyers and brought them to Officer Ramirez. This is harassment, I said. She's trying to turn the neighborhood against me. It's definitely not helping her case, Officer Ramirez agreed. We're still investigating the vandalism. If we can prove she was involved, she'll face charges. The investigation moved slowly. Police questioned Patricia, who denied everything with indignant outrage. They questioned other board members, neighbors, anyone who might have seen something. The problem was that the vandalism had occurred late at night, and no one had witnessed it. Then, a week later, I got a call from Tom. "You need to see this." He came over with his laptop and showed me a video. It was security camera footage from his house, which had a view of the street and part of my yard. The timestamp showed it was from the night of the vandalism. Around 2 in the morning, the video was grainy but clear enough. It showed Patricia's white SUV pulling up to my house. She got out, looked around nervously, then walked quickly to the flagpole with what looked like wire cutters in her hand. The video showed her cutting the cable, then trying unsuccessfully to remove the sensors before giving up and hurrying back to her car. "I didn't realize my camera had caught this until I was reviewing footage from that night for something else," Tom explained. "I thought you should see it before I give it to the police." "Tom, this is gold. Thank you." We immediately contacted Officer Ramirez, who came by to collect the footage. Her expression was grim as she watched it. "This is clear-cut vandalism. We'll be making an arrest. What about the flyers? We can add harassment to the charges if you want to press it. Given everything that's happened, I think you have a strong case." The next day, I watched from my window as police cars pulled up to Patricia's house 3 doors down. Officer Ramirez and another officer knocked on her door. When Patricia answered, they had a brief conversation before she was placed in handcuffs and led to a police car. The neighborhood was buzzing within minutes. People came out of their houses, watching the scene unfold. Some looked shocked, others vindicated. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I had never wanted it to come to this. Patricia was charged with vandalism of federal property, criminal mischief, and harassment. The vandalism charge alone carried serious penalties because it involved federal equipment. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the federal prosecutor, working in conjunction with the National Weather Service's legal team, wasn't in a generous mood. The case went to court 2 months later. I had to testify, explaining the importance of the weather station and the impact of the vandalism. The prosecution presented Tom's security footage, which was damning. Patricia's defense tried to argue that she was under stress and acted irrationally, but the judge wasn't sympathetic. "Mrs. Carson," the judge said, "you deliberately destroyed federal property in an attempt to enforce what you perceived as your authority. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. You planned this action, executed it in the middle of the night, and then lied to investigators. That shows consciousness of guilt and a blatant disregard for the law." She was found guilty on all counts. The sentence was harsh: 6 months in jail, 2 years of probation, a $10,000 fine, and restitution for the damaged equipment. She was also ordered to perform 200 hours of community service and banned from serving on any HOA board for 10 years. As I watched her being led from the courtroom, I felt no joy in her downfall. This whole situation had been unnecessary. If she had just listened, if she had been willing to understand the importance of the weather station, none of this would have happened. But that wasn't Patricia's way. She had built her identity around being the enforcer, the one who kept the neighborhood in line. When someone challenged that authority, even with legitimate reasons, she couldn't back down. It had cost her everything. Life in Meadowbrook Estates slowly returned to normal. A new AA board was elected, led by Tom as president. Their first official action was to formally recognize the weather station as a community asset and amend the bylaws to include exemptions for equipment serving public safety functions. The National Weather Service sent a representative to a neighborhood barbecue to thank everyone for their support. He gave a presentation about how weather monitoring works and the importance of stations like mine. Kids were fascinated by the equipment, asking questions about wind speed and temperature measurement. The station continued its work, silently collecting data day and night. It detected early signs of an unseasonable snowstorm that November, allowing the Weather Service to issue warnings that helped people prepare. It tracked wind patterns that aided in wildfire prevention efforts the following summer. It became a quiet but essential part of the infrastructure that kept people safe. I got a commendation from the National Weather Service for my handling of the situation and my dedication to maintaining the station despite the challenges. Gerald told me that the publicity from the case had actually helped secure funding for additional weather monitoring stations throughout Colorado. "You turned a negative into a positive," he said during a visit to check on the equipment. "A lot of people who had no idea about the importance of weather monitoring now understand it. That's valuable." One evening, about 6 months after the trial, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when a car pulled up. A woman got out, someone I didn't recognize. She was in her 50s with graying hair and a tired expression. "Mr. Emerson, I'm Linda Carson, Patricia's sister." I stood up, unsure what to expect. "Hello." I wanted to apologize for what my sister did. She's always been difficult, but this situation brought out the worst in her. I hope you know that the rest of our family was horrified by her actions. I appreciate you saying that. How is she doing? Linda sighed. She's serving her time. It's been hard for her, but maybe it's what she needed. She spent so long trying to control everything and everyone around her that she forgot how to be a person. I'm hoping that when she gets out, she'll have learned something. I hope so too. I never wanted any of this. I know. I read the court transcripts. You were more than fair to her. She brought this on herself. Linda paused, looking up at the flagpole. It's beautiful, actually, and knowing what it does, that it helps keep people safe. I think it's wonderful that you fought to keep it. After she left, I sat back down and thought about everything that had happened. The conflict with the HOA, the vandalism, the trial. It had all been so consuming for months. But in the end, the weather station stood tall, doing the work it was meant to do. The flag snapped in the evening breeze, and I checked my phone to see the latest readings. Wind from the southwest at 12 miles per hour, temperature 68 degrees, humidity at 45%. Clear skies forecasted for the next 3 days. Normal, routine data that would be fed into forecasting models, analyzed by meteorologists, and used to keep people informed and safe. That was what mattered. Not Patricia's ego, not the HOA's arbitrary rules, but the simple fact that accurate weather information saved lives and made people's daily existence better. I had stood my ground for something important, and despite the difficulties, it had been worth it. The next year brought its own challenges and rewards. Colorado weather is notoriously unpredictable, and the station proved its value time and again. In March, it detected a rapid temperature drop that preceded a severe ice storm, giving forecasters crucial early data. In June, it tracked the formation of dangerous thunderstorms that spawned several tornadoes in the area. In September, it monitored wind conditions during a major wildfire that threatened communities north of Boulder. Each time the data from my station contributed to a successful warning or accurate forecast, I felt a deep sense of purpose. This was why I had become a meteorologist in the first place, to help people understand and prepare for weather events. The neighborhood had transformed as well. Tom's leadership of the HOA was collaborative rather than dictatorial. He actually asked people what they wanted, listened to concerns, and worked to find solutions that benefited everyone. The difference was remarkable. One of Tom's initiatives was creating a neighborhood weather awareness program. He asked if I would be willing to give quarterly presentations about weather safety and preparedness. I agreed, and those sessions became surprisingly popular. Families came together to learn about tornado safety, winter storm preparation, and how to interpret weather forecasts. During one of these sessions, a young girl named Sophie, maybe 10 years old, raised her hand. "Mr. Emerson, how do you become a meteorologist?" I smiled. "Well, you need to study a lot of math and science in school, physics especially, and you need to be curious about why weather happens the way it does." "I want to do that," she said with complete certainty. "I want to help people know when storms are coming." Her mother caught my eye and mouthed, "Thank you." Moments like that reminded me why all the struggle had been worthwhile. The legal aftermath of Patricia's case continued for months. Her appeals were denied, and she served her full sentence. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved away after her release, relocating to Arizona to live with relatives. Some people spoke of her with lingering anger, others with pity. I tried not to think about her much at all. Derek Mills, the HOA attorney who had been caught between Patricia's demands and legal reality, actually reached out to me about a year after the trial. He wanted to apologize for not standing up to her more firmly. "I should have told her from the beginning that she had no case," he admitted over coffee. "But she was so insistent, and frankly, she was intimidating. I took the easy route and gave her the answers she wanted to hear rather than the legal truth." "We all make mistakes," I said. "What matters is learning from them." I've changed how I practice now. If a client wants to pursue something that's legally questionable, I tell them straight out. I don't care if it costs me business. What happened to Patricia? What she put you through? I don't want to be part of something like that again. The weather station became something of a local landmark. The Boulder Daily Camera did a feature story about it, complete with photos and an explanation of its role in regional weather monitoring. A local TV station did a segment for the evening news, interviewing me and showing footage of the equipment. That publicity brought unexpected benefits. A middle school science teacher contacted me about bringing her class for a field trip to see the station. I agreed, and we set up a program where students could learn about meteorology, see real weather equipment, and understand how data collection works. Those field trips became regular events. Seeing kids get excited about weather science, asking questions about clouds and wind and atmospheric pressure, gave me a new appreciation for education and outreach. Several students told me they were considering careers in meteorology or atmospheric science because of the visit. The National Weather Service noticed the educational value and provided additional resources. They sent demonstration materials, educational posters, and even a portable weather balloon kit that I could use to show students how upper atmosphere data is collected. Gerald visited during one of these school groups. He watched me explaining how the anemometer measures wind speed, demonstrating how temperature sensors work, and answering rapid-fire questions from enthusiastic 12-year-olds. Afterward, he pulled me aside. "You've turned this into something bigger than just a monitoring station. This is genuine community science education." "It evolved naturally," I said. "Once people understood what the station does and why it matters, they wanted to learn more. We're thinking about using your model for other community-based stations. Weather monitoring is more effective when people understand and support it. You've shown how that can work." That conversation led to me consulting on the development of new weather stations in other Colorado communities. The National Weather Service wanted to expand their monitoring network, and they recognized that community buy-in was crucial. I helped design outreach programs, worked with local officials to address concerns, and shared lessons learned from my experience with the HOA. One of those new stations was installed in a town called Lyons, about 20 miles north of Boulder. The homeowner, a retired teacher named Rachel, had been initially enthusiastic but became worried when her HOA raised objections. I met with her and the HOA board, explaining the legal framework and the public benefit. Unlike Patricia, this HOA board actually listened. They asked thoughtful questions about visual impact, property values, and maintenance responsibilities. I addressed each concern honestly and thoroughly. By the end of the meeting, they had voted to approve the station with an amended variance to the height restrictions. "I wish my situation had gone this smoothly," I told Rachel afterward. She laughed. "Me too, but I think your case made this easier. People have heard about what happened to Patricia Carson. Nobody wants to be the next example of HOA overreach gone wrong." That was true. The case had gotten enough publicity that it had become a cautionary tale in HOA circles. I heard from several people in similar situations who cited the Carson case when pushing back against unreasonable restrictions. It had created legal precedent that protected homeowners operating federal equipment or providing public services. 2 years after the initial confrontation with Patricia, I received an invitation to speak at a national meteorology conference in Denver. The topic was community-based weather monitoring and public engagement. I was nervous about presenting to professional colleagues, but Gerald encouraged me. "You have a story that people need to hear," he said. "Weather monitoring isn't just about equipment and data. It's about people and communities. You've lived that reality." The presentation went better than I expected. I talked about the initial installation of the station, the conflict with the HOA, the legal battle, and the eventual transformation into an educational resource. I showed photos of student field trips, shared data about forecast improvements, and discussed lessons learned about community engagement. During the question and answer session, a meteorologist from Montana asked, "How did you stay motivated during the worst of the conflict, when the HOA was fighting you and threatening fines?" I thought about that for a moment. I kept coming back to why the station mattered. It wasn't about winning an argument with Patricia Carson. It was about ensuring that accurate weather data was available to people who needed it. Every time I felt frustrated or wanted to give up, I reminded myself of that bigger purpose. Another attendee, a woman from a state weather service in Kansas, commented, "Your case has already influenced how we approach community stations. We're being more proactive about working with local authorities and HOAs before installation to prevent conflicts." "That's exactly right," I said. "Prevention is better than fighting. If I could do it over, I would have engaged with the HOA before installing the station, educated them about its purpose, and sought their approval up front. That might have avoided the whole mess." Of course, I couldn't actually know if that would have worked with someone like Patricia. She might have opposed it regardless. But the principle was sound. Communication and education prevent conflicts. The conference was energizing. I met meteorologists from across the country, all passionate about weather science and its applications. Several approached me afterward to discuss collaboration on community monitoring projects. By the time I returned to Boulder, I had commitments to consult on 3 new installations and an invitation to co-author a paper about community weather station best practices. Life settled into a productive rhythm. I continued my regular work for the National Weather Service, analyzing weather patterns and contributing to forecasts. The station hummed along, collecting data every second of every day. Student groups visited regularly. The neighborhood remained peaceful under Tom's sensible leadership of the HOA. Then, 3 years after the initial conflict, I got an unexpected letter. It was handwritten, the return address from an apartment in Phoenix, Arizona. The name on the envelope was Patricia Carson. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Part of me wanted to throw it away unread, but curiosity won out. The letter was 2 pages written in careful cursive. "Dear Mr. Emerson," it began, "I doubt you expected to hear from me, and I wouldn't blame you if you threw this letter away without reading it. But I hope you'll give me a chance to say something I should have said a long time ago. I'm sorry. I've spent the past 3 years thinking about what I did and why I did it. The jail time was difficult, but it gave me time to reflect, forced to confront truths about myself that I had been avoiding for decades. I was wrong about the flagpole. I was wrong about the weather station. Most importantly, I was wrong in how I treated you. You were doing important work that helped people, and I tried to stop you because of pride and a misguided sense of authority. I told myself I was enforcing rules and maintaining standards, but the truth is I was feeding my own ego. Being HOA president made me feel important and powerful. When you challenged that, even for legitimate reasons, I couldn't handle it. Instead of listening and trying to understand, I escalated and attacked. The consequences were my own fault. I vandalized your equipment, harassed you, and broke the law. I deserved everything that happened to me. But beyond my personal consequences, I hurt the neighborhood and created conflict where none needed to exist. I've read about what the weather station has accomplished since then. The accurate forecasts, the early warnings, the educational programs for students, all of that could have been happening sooner if I hadn't interfered. I prevented good things from happening because of my own issues. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness or to make myself feel better. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. You were right and I was wrong. The work you do matters, and I'm sorry I tried to stop it. I hope you're doing well. I hope the weather station continues to serve the community for many years to come. Sincerely, Patricia Carson. I read the letter 3 times. It was clearly sincere, written by someone who had genuinely grappled with her actions and their consequences. I felt a complicated mix of emotions, validation, sadness, and something close to compassion. I thought about responding but ultimately decided against it. Patricia needed to move forward with her life, and dredging up the past wouldn't help either of us. The letter itself was enough an acknowledgement and an apology. Sometimes that's all you can ask for. I filed the letter away and went back to my work. The weather station continued its mission, indifferent to human drama, steadily recording temperature, humidity, wind speed, atmospheric pressure. The data flowed to the National Weather Service computers, was integrated into models, and helped forecasters understand what was happening in the atmosphere over Boulder. And the Front Range spring brought severe thunderstorms, and the station helped track their development and movement. Summer brought heat waves, and the temperature data contributed to public health warnings. Fall brought the threat of early snow, and the atmospheric pressure readings helped predict when storms would arrive. Winter brought blizzards, and the wind measurements were crucial for understanding dangerous conditions. Year after year, the station performed its function. Equipment occasionally needed maintenance or replacement, but the core mission never changed. Collect accurate data, transmit it reliably, contribute to the understanding of weather patterns. Tom served 2 terms as HOA president before stepping down. His successor, a software engineer named Karen, not the stereotypical kind, continued his collaborative approach. The HOA became what it should have always been, a practical organization that maintained common areas and resolved disputes without drama. The neighborhood itself evolved. Young families moved in, attracted by good schools and proximity to Boulder's tech industry. Older residents retired and moved away or aged in place. The faces changed, but the community spirit that had developed during the conflict with Patricia remained. New residents were told about the weather station during their welcome meetings. It was presented as a point of pride, something that made Meadowbrook Estate special. Very few of them knew about the conflict that had surrounded its installation. That history faded into the background, replaced by the present reality of a valued community asset. Sophie, the young girl who had expressed interest in meteorology during one of my presentations, reached out when she was applying to colleges. She asked if I would write a letter of recommendation for her application to the Atmospheric Science program at Colorado State University. "You inspired me to pursue this," she wrote in her email. "That day when you explained how weather monitoring works, I knew this was what I wanted to do with my life." I wrote her a glowing recommendation. She was accepted and thrived in the program. During her sophomore year, she did an internship with the National Weather Service, working in the same office where Gerald still served as supervisor. "Your protégé is impressive," Gerald told me. "Sharp, dedicated, asks great questions. She's going to be an excellent meteorologist." That news filled me with quiet pride. The weather station had served its immediate purpose of collecting data, but it had also inspired the next generation of scientists. That was a legacy I hadn't anticipated but deeply valued. As the years passed, the flagpole weathered thousands of storms. It stood firm through 100-mile-per-hour winds during a historic winter blizzard. It endured hailstones the size of golf balls during a severe thunderstorm. It bore the weight of heavy snow and ice during multiple freeze-thaw cycles. The flag had to be replaced periodically, torn apart by relentless wind, but the pole and the equipment it supported remained solid. I had the opportunity to move several times. Job offers came from the National Weather Service offices in other states, from universities with meteorology programs, from private weather forecasting companies. Each time I considered the offers seriously but ultimately declined. The work I was doing in Boulder felt important and meaningful. The weather station, the educational programs, the community connections, they mattered. On a quiet evening 10 years after the initial confrontation with Patricia, I stood in my driveway looking up at the flagpole exactly as I had on that Tuesday morning when she first approached me. The flag snapped in the breeze, crisp and bright against the darkening sky. The equipment mounted on the pole was newer, updated as technology improved, but the fundamental purpose remained unchanged. My phone buzzed with a severe weather alert. A line of thunderstorms was developing over the mountains, moving east toward the plains. The alert included data from my station, showing wind shift and pressure drop that indicated the storm's intensity. People across the region would receive the warning, giving them time to seek shelter or postpone outdoor activities. This was why I had fought to keep the station operational. Not because I wanted to defy the HOA or prove a point, but because accurate weather information saves lives and improves daily existence for thousands of people. I thought about Patricia's letter, which I still had filed away in my office. She had understood eventually that some things are bigger than rules and regulations and personal authority. I hoped she had found peace in Arizona, had rebuilt her life into something healthier and more balanced. The storms rolled in that night, bringing heavy rain and frequent lightning. I monitored the weather station data, watching as wind speeds spiked and rainfall rates increased. The station performed flawlessly, transmitting information that helped forecasters track the storm's progress and update their warnings. By morning, the storms had passed. The sky was clear and brilliant blue, washed clean by the rain. I went outside to inspect the station, checking for any damage from the intense weather. Everything was intact, functioning perfectly. A car pulled up and Tom got out. He had remained a close friend even after stepping down from the HOA board. "Quite a storm last night," he said. "The station recorded wind gusts up to 73 miles per hour. He whistled. "Glad we had warning. I was able to get my patio furniture secured before it hit." "That's the whole point," I said. We stood there together, looking up at the flagpole, and I felt a deep sense of contentment. The journey had been difficult, marked by conflict and stress and legal battles. But the destination was worth it. The weather station stood tall, serving its purpose, helping people, contributing to scientific knowledge, and inspiring future meteorologists. Sometimes standing up for what's right means fighting battles you'd rather avoid. It means confronting people who abuse authority, enduring harassment and threats, navigating legal systems and bureaucratic processes. It's exhausting and frustrating and often feels futile. But in the end, if you're fighting for something that genuinely matters, something that serves a purpose beyond yourself, it's worth the struggle. The weather station wasn't just about me or my career or my property rights. It was about providing a public service, contributing to safety and knowledge and scientific understanding. That was a fight worth having. And looking up at that 30-foot flagpole, watching the flag wave proudly in the Colorado breeze while sophisticated instruments silently collected data that would help thousands of people, I knew I had made the right choice. The station would continue its work long after I was gone. It would monitor storms and track temperature changes and measure wind speeds. It would contribute to forecasts that help people plan their days and prepare for severe weather. It would inspire students to pursue science and demonstrate the practical value of meteorological research. Patricia Carson had demanded I shorten the flagpole. She had threatened fines and legal action. She had vandalized equipment and harassed me, but she couldn't destroy what the station represented: a commitment to public service, scientific integrity, and the simple but profound idea that accurate information helps people live better, safer lives. That was a legacy worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth all the struggle. And as I stood there in my driveway on that clear morning after the storm, I felt grateful for the opportunity to contribute to something larger than myself, something that would continue making a difference for years to come. The weather station stood tall, and I stood beside it, knowing that we had both weathered our own kinds of storms and emerged stronger for it.